Welcome to Lesson 9 of our study on Old Testament End Times Prophecy. This lesson is on Armageddon, so it will have amazing and interesting facts. Before we get into it, I just want to say that in our first lesson, I brought up the primary purpose of this course, and that is to lay a solid Old Testament foundation under your New Testament eschatology. Many Christians have an eschatology that's based on New Testament text alone. So these scriptures and prophecies and foreshadows and types that we're going over, if you will receive them and believe them, you will have a powerful certainty, a strong foundation under your belief of what is actually going to happen soon. I also want to remind you to read the entire textbook, and it will instruct you. Also use it as a reference book. When you're reading in the Old Testament and you're wondering, does this have some type of eschatological implication here or foreshadowing, then look it up in the book and you'll see if there's an entry there. It will hopefully eliminate the meaning of that text and be a blessing to you. Also, I just want to remind you that the syllabus study guide has a tremendous amount of information. For instance, on this lesson, we can't go over but about half, maybe 3/4. So be sure that in your studies, you take this course, you read the entire syllabus, and I would encourage you to look up all those texts. And if you really want to do it right, read the textbook on those portions that are being discussed in the study guide. And it will give you a very full understanding of the subject matter. I want to also correct an error that I made yesterday when we were in Lesson 7. I was connecting Ezekiel 14:12 through 21, which is a very important passage talking about God's 4 severe judgments. And I was referring to Revelation 6, but I wasn't clear in what I described. Revelation 6:1 through 8 mentions 4 different judgments: war, famine, pestilence, and death by wild animals, 4 of them. They're exactly the severe judgments that God identifies in this passage in Ezekiel 14:12 through 21. So I just want to make that correction to be sure you understand that, because we made the point that proves beyond the shadow of a doubt for any reasonable person that from the very beginning of the tribulation period, God's wrath is being poured out. It is specified as the wrath of the Lamb. It's not the wrath of man. It's not the wrath of Satan. It is the wrath of God beginning to come on the earth. And those 4 seals that I just described to you in Revelation 6:1 through 8 lead to the death of 1/4 of the human race. Right now, that's 2 billion people. It's a staggering fact. One more thing I want to bring up to you. The book, our textbook here, The Day of the Lord Commentary, is one of 4 end-time books that I've written. Just heard yesterday from Logos Bible Software that all 4 books are now in the Logos Bible bookstore. That is Revelation Notes, and then also the Second Coming of Christ, the Tribulation Story, and this book, The Day of the Lord Commentary. All 4 are available in the Logos Bible bookstore if you are a Logos user. Now, Lesson 9, Armageddon. Oh my goodness, what a subject. What a subject. This is what the world has been headed toward. And people know about the word Armageddon, but they don't know what it means. Again, we defined it earlier. It's very simple. The hill of Megiddo, which overlooks the Jezreel Valley. So the battle takes place down in the Jezreel Valley. That is the primary battlefield. Let's look at section 1, Ezekiel's prophecy of Armageddon. This is Ezekiel 38:1 through 17. This is the prime description of Armageddon in the entire Bible. It's the central portion of Revelation. Point 1 tells us Gog, the prince of Rosh, launches the Armageddon war in verses 2 and 3. Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O God, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal. So here, there is no historical or contemporaneous figure today named Gog. It is merely a symbol of the leader of the people of the Rus, today the Russians. Magog, land of Gog, which is Scythia, that is according to Josephus, he identified it as Scythia. This is southern Russia, just north of the Black Sea. So immediately we see there's a strong connection to the region of the world north of Israel that we're making here. Meshach and Tubal cannot be definitely linked to Moscow and Tobolsk. This figure, so we can't make that. Some people will say that, but there is no definite link, either linguistically or historically, for us to say definitively that they are those cities. There is enough evidence, though, for us to see that it's likely going to be a Russian or a European invasion that we're describing here against Israel. Now, the figure Gog is Antichrist, that's clear. He's Daniel's prince that shall come. He is the little horn that Daniel described. He is the king of fierce countenance that Daniel also identified. He is John's beast of Revelation 13. And God is against Gog. Now, if I misspeak and say Gog when I should have said God, you just bear with me. So God is against Gog. Whoever this individual actually is, God is angry with him. He's against him. Point 2, God sovereignly permits this conflict for his own purpose. Listen to these verses, 4, 16, and 17. I'm going to select them for reading. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and lead you out with all your army, horses, and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. Now, this means that this will be an overwhelming attack. It will be in the latter days that I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me, when I am hallowed or consecrated in you, O God, before their eyes. We see immediate parallel to God's dealings with Pharaoh. Very, very parallel circumstances. Thus says the Lord God, are you he of whom I have spoken in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied for years in those days that I would bring you against them? Here we see God is sovereignly permitting God to come. And so he actually says, I'm sending you, I'm bringing you. Again, this shows that God is in control of Gog. Just as we see in the book of Revelation, I described this yesterday, the first seal that begins the 7-year period of tribulation from the heavenly perspective is released by the Lamb, showing the Lamb is in control of everything that happens from Revelation 6 to 19. Here we see the same language and the same fact described by Ezekiel. God is in control. He's the one who pulls Gog into this situation. Just like a fisherman pulls a fish in, God baits Gog, making an attack appear to be for his advantage. Then he hooks him and draws him in by deluding him with an initial victory. You know, in AD 66, when the Jews rebelled against Rome, they were initially successful in several battles, and therefore their courage was pumped that they could take on the Roman legions. Well, they found out different, because it was not God's will for the Jewish people at that time to have complete autonomy. Daniel's prophecy was still in play, and God was sovereignly permitting the Romans to overrule them. They didn't understand that. They didn't receive it if they did understand it. And now, so we see here that God is going to have an initial victory over Israel. And by this, he will think in his own mind, he has defeated the people of God, so he can defeat God himself. Now, 3.5 years later, God allures Gog to his judgment and death at the final battle of Armageddon. Point 3, Gog's forces are described as a great company with a vast weaponry. Verse 4, I will turn you around, put hooks into your jaws, and lead you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company, or a great horde, the complete Jewish Bible says, with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords. Now again, remember, God is describing in ancient language and symbols and weaponry what will be a modern battle with all the ever-innovating weaponry that we have today. Point 4, Gog's home base is revealed from the far north. Verses 6-15 is what we'll read here from chapter 38, and then we'll read chapter 39 too. All right, verse 6, Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah, from the far north, or the uttermost part of the north, the English Standard Version says, or the remote parts of the north, says the New American Standard, and all its troops, many people are with you. Then you will come from your place out of the far north. Now I'm reading verse 15. You and many peoples with you, all of them, now note again, out of the far north, all of them riding on horses, a great company and a mighty army. That's verse 15. Now let's look at chapter 39, verse 2. And I will turn you around and lead you on, bringing you up from the far north and bring you against the mountains of Israel. Now, why did I select these verses? Because they all clearly state that Gog and his military forces come from the north. In fact, the distant north. So here's something you need to consider. Moscow is approximately 1,659 miles due north of Israel. Check this out to confirm it yourself. Now, I say that not because I have any kind of animosity against Russia or the Russian people. Absolutely not. We have wonderful brothers and sisters there. But we're talking about the action of a head of state, not the people, not the people in the country. So anyway, that's just a fact we need to understand. Moscow is due north of Israel, 1,650 miles north. Also, Russia and the former USSR have historically been strongly anti-Semitic. They have never stood with Israel in Israel's battles against its Arab neighbors. Never. Never. Point 5, Gog's allies are named Iran, Sudan, Libya, Turkey, and Armenia, verses 5 and 6. Push, this is in chapter 38, Persia, Cush, and Put are with them, all of them with shield and helmet, this is verse 5. Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah, from the far north and all its troops, many people are with you. So Gog's allies in this battle are Persia, Iran, we can certainly see that, that's obvious. Cush, Sudan. Put, which is Libya. Gomer, which is Turkey. And Togarmah, which is Armenia. Now, all of these are Islamic states, and they're sworn enemies of Israel, except Armenia. This is a Christian nation, 96%. But it still traditionally has allied itself with Russia. So I think we see here immediately that this scripture, uttered by Ezekiel so long ago, is spot on to where we are today. It also will help you understand how close we are to these events. That these very nations that he mentioned as being allies of the power from the far north are here today. And in plain sight, we see they are sympathetic with Russian anti-Semitism and any other anti-Semitism. So things are lining up clearly. And I don't say that to try to be sensational. I'm just noting it. It's clear. It's facts. These are facts. Now, number 6, the general time of Gog's assault is given after many days, or in the latter years. This is 38, verse 8 and 16. Verse 8 says, after many days you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. What's he saying? He said, you're going to attack my people when they've come back to their land. They were brought out of the nations, and now all of them dwell safely. So Israel will feel secure. Now verse 16, you will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. Again, note this language, like a cloud which covers the land. It will be in the latter days that I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me. Why? What is he saying? He says, so that ultimately through overturning Gog's victory, God shows his sovereignty and supremacy over this evil son of Satan, if you will. And he says, I'm going to be hallowed in you, O Gog, before their eyes, the eyes of the nations. Now, the latter years means the last days. That's according to the New American Standard Version. And distant future is the translation of the New Living Translation. Latter end is Young's literal translation. So we're talking about the distant future from the time Ezekiel made this prophecy. Or put differently, not in Ezekiel's day. That's certainly true. More specifically, at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation period. Daniel 9:27 reveals this. And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. That is 1 week of years, 7 years. We discussed this. We did not discuss this earlier. This was the section which we passed over, and I encouraged you to be sure you study what's in your study guide on Daniel 9. It's a tremendously important prophecy. I really regret that we could not open it up in this study. So Daniel 9:27 says, in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to the sacrifice and the grain offering. So this identifies, first of all, that the covenant begins a 7-year period when Antichrist signs a peace agreement with Israel. And secondly, it identifies the time of his assault when he turns on Israel in the middle of the week, or 3.5 years into this period. Now, point 7, Israel's condition. All right, we'll read verses 8, 11, 12, and 14. Verse 8. After many days you will be visited in the latter years. You will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many nations. I just referred to that earlier. Now let's look at verse 11. You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled villages. Now in ancient times, an unwalled village was a village that was so secure they felt they needed no walls for protection. Usually it was very large. I will go, or they were in a land where they were not surrounded by warlike peoples. So he's speaking of Israel being at peace and secure. This is the time of this attack. You will say, I will go up against a land of unwalled cities. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely. Again, who dwell safely. All of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. They're not afraid of an assault or an attack. Now let's read verse 12. To take plunder and to take booty. Now here is his motive revealed. He wants to rob Israel of its wealth. To stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against the people gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land. Verse 12. Or those who live at the center of the world, or they think the whole world revolves around them. So this is describing Israel as being very secure, perhaps even a little bit haughty. They're so prosperous and secure. Israel is regathered, that's clear. And today, Israel already is very prosperous. They're one of the smallest nations on earth, geographically, and also in their population, but they're very prosperous. They have a powerful economy. But Israel has never been completely secure, even since the fall of Judah. If you think about it. During the exile, certainly not, they were not secure because they were exiled and scattered abroad. And in the post-exile period, they still had no real security. The Samaritans threatened them. During the Roman era, they were subject to the Romans. And then after the diaspora, they were just scattered throughout the world. And even the modern state of Israel since 1948 has never been fully secure. They've always had hostile neighbors on their borders, ready to attack or ready to terrorize them. But Israel will be very secure because of the 7-year pact it signs with Antichrist. Now, this is very important that we understand that. Then when he makes peace with Israel, because he is the world's greatest military power and political leader, they will feel secure. No one could attack them if Antichrist, the beast, has made an agreement with them to protect them, to be an ally in any conflict. Now, they will also be at the center of world attention, Israel will be during this time, due to its prosperity. And also, there's something that's not in this text that I'm going to interpose, and that's the Jewish Jesus revival of the first half of the tribulation. We talked about Zechariah 8, verses 20 through 23. We referred to Revelation 7, where the 144,000 are named and sealed, that is, their name being of 12 tribes of Israel. And we talked about the man-child of Revelation 12 that is birthed by the nation Israel. That is not an individual, that's a company of young Jewish male evangelists who take the gospel to Israel and the world during the first half of the tribulation period. So Israel will be prospering greatly during this time economically, and then they will be in a great period of spiritual revival and awakening of the dry bones coming together and having God breathe the life of his breath into them for the first time in thousands of years as a people. This is the condition Israel will be in when Antichrist attacks. Number 8, the nature of the attack is given like a cloud or overwhelming. Verses 9 and 16 state this: you will ascend, coming like a storm, covering the land like a cloud. This speaks of a storm that comes, you see it on the horizon, but before you can get out of the way, it's right on top of you. You're enveloped by it. It's far greater and more powerful than you are. I'm from North Carolina. We have hurricanes come up every year or two, and when they do, if you're in a coastal area, you're urged to evacuate. But if you don't evacuate, the storm just envelops you, and you have to hunker down and wait until the storm passes. So Antichrist is going to overwhelm Israel. There it is. This agrees, again, with what we've read in other passages. Again, in verse 16, you will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. So this describes not only an overwhelming attack, but a sudden attack. Blitzkrieg is the word, which means lightning war. Lightning war. So this speaks of the treachery of Antichrist because he's made the agreement and he never intended to keep it. He always intended to conquer the Jews because he is viciously anti-Semitic, but he hides that through his political savvy and diplomatic front. Israel's deceived. Isaiah 28, verses 15 and 18 call Israel's covenant with Antichrist a covenant with death. Why? Because Isaiah sees the end of it. He sees what it leads to, Holocaust 2. They made a deal with the devil, to put it in layman's terms. Again, this text affirms that Israel will be defeated in the tribulation period, exactly as we learned from Daniel in Daniel 7, 21 and 22, and from John in Revelation 13, 7. Point 9, the reason for the attack, to take Israeli spoil and captives. We read that earlier. We won't repeat that. The texts are given to you, verses 12 and 13. So this is Gog's evil thought. He wants to rob the Jewish people, and listen to this. He wants to enslave them. Enslave them. We know this from Joel 3. because there God says he's coming to judge the nations because they have enslaved his people and sent them here and there around the world as slaves. Now, you may say, we don't have slavery today. My friend, we have more human bondage today than in the history of the world, by far. It is really the single greatest problem of Interpol. All police forces worldwide are searching for individuals, particularly women, who have been taken for the sex trade. So, this is what Antichrist has in mind. He wants to plunder Israel's wealth, and he wants to enslave its people because he hates them. Also, an example in recent history, Hitler, and many people don't realize this, Hitler in Europe didn't just send the Jews to the gas chambers. What he preferred to do often with not just Jews but others is to enslave them, put them to forced labor where they were working tremendously long hours, fed very little, and literally they were worked to death. So this is exactly a foreshadowing of what Antichrist is going to do to the Israelis during this period. And also, what is not mentioned in this passage, but I've just mentioned it earlier, he lusts to shut down this religious movement in Israel. Why? Because he must exalt himself. That's 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4. The man of sin is going to sit in the temple of God, say that he is God, and he is religion incarnate. So he can't be God and Jesus be God at the same time. So it's a very simple matter of eliminating the competition. We go right back to the first advent. What happened then? The Pharisees and Sadducees, who did not agree on anything else, agreed they needed to get rid of this Nazarene carpenter prophet. And so they joined together and did away with him. They eliminated the religious competition. And that's what Antichrist will be doing at the midpoint of the tribulation. Now, if you want to have a lot more information on this, I urge you to get my book, The Tribulation Story. Now, when he does attack Israel and overwhelm Israel, this will give him full control of the world. The beast defeat of Israel and assumption of world rule are linked together in Revelation 13, 5, and 7. Let me see if I can get this for you just a moment. I believe we can get this up on the computer. Let me read those texts for you. Bear with me just a moment. Okay, here they are, Revelation 13, 5 through 7. And there was given unto him, that is the beast, a mouth speaking great things. So we see John agrees with Daniel's description of the little horn speaking great things. And blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months, or 3.5 years. 3.5 years. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Who is he talking about? Why would you have a rage against people in heaven? Because this is the translated church. He knows they were here. He knows they said they would be taken, and he knows they were taken, and he's furious about it. And so he's raging against God, and particularly his name, and that name will be Yeshua, Jesus. Now look at verse 7. And, so it's all connected here with this conjunction, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. That is a reference to the Jewish people. And to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So in this verse 7, the beast conquest of Israel is directly linked, that is, it occurs in the same context. It is linked with his coming to complete world power. So it's, to simplify it, during the first 3.5 years, Antichrist is rising to power, and in the last 3.5 years, he has full world power. Okay, so let's go back and to our text just a moment here. Now, point B, God's overwhelming attack on Gog's army. Again, if I get my gods and Gogs mixed up, you bear with me. Now, we're looking at Ezekiel 38, 18 through 23. This is God's response to all this. Number one, God's mood is revealed. Let's read verses 18 and 19. And it will come to pass at the same time, when God comes against the land of Israel, says the Lord God, that my fury will show in my face. That's verse 18. Now verse 19. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath, I have spoken. This is powerful language. And we're talking about God being furious with holy jealousy over Gog's treachery, violence, spoiling, and enslaving of his precious Jewish people, who have at this period, that is many of them, turned back to him and received Jesus. Wow. You know, God said in the Psalms, touch not mine anointed, do my prophets no harm. Oh my goodness, Gog doesn't realize what he's done. So God is furious over Gog's self-deification and his desecration of what will be the third Jewish temple yet to be built. He's furious over his persecution of the Jewish people, enslaving them. He's angry over his stealing of Israel's land and wealth. He brought them back to that land. He blessed them so they could prosper. And now Gog is coming, taking that wealth. And of the desecration of the third temple. He will sit in that temple saying he is God, not Yahweh. And his blasphemous, anti-God, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish rhetoric. We just read about that in Revelation 13, verse 6. It also agrees with Daniel's description of the little horn in Daniel 7, verses 8, 20, and 25. Number two, God's response is described. We're told how he responds. Verse 22, and I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. I will rain down on him, on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him, flooding rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. What is he talking about? Well, without question, he's talking about the final bowl or vial judgments that are poured out rapidly at the end of the tribulation period, like a torrential rain, like a flood of judgments, ending in the Armageddon, the final Armageddon conflict at the Valley of Jezreel. This is what he's describing here with symbolic language. Flooding rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Also, there will be some of these elements in the final plagues, both the trumpet and the bowl judgments of Revelation 9 and 10 and 16. So this great flooding rain, or torrential rain, as several translations put it, of the latter part of the latter half of the 3.5 years. Why does God choose this language? There's something here we need to be sure we don't miss. This flood language links the worldwide flood of tribulation judgments to the worldwide flood of water in Noah's days. Here we have a subtle link. This is not unintentional. This is by God's inspiration and design. The flood of judgments on Antichrist is similar to the flood of rain that brought the great deluge in Noah's day. No coincidence here. That's why Jesus promised to return in what? Times like the days of Noah. There's a definite connection here. Point 3, God's judgments are identified. Now we'll read verses 19, 20, 21, and 22. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel, so that the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, the beasts of the fields, all creeping things that creep on the earth, and all men who are in the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. The mountains shall be thrown down. The steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. Talking about a massive earthquake that brings down mountains and all the buildings. I will call for a sword, war against Gog throughout all my mountains. Now here we see the principle of what you sow, you reap. And in Revelation 13, the same passage that we read, it is interjected in there. There's a little parenthetic passage saying that the faith of the saints is tested by the fact that he who kills with a sword must be killed with a sword. Who's he speaking about? Antichrist. Ezekiel saying the same thing. God says, I will call for a sword against God. That is, I will stir military opposition to him to come against him. Every man's sword will be against his brother. What is he talking about there? He's talking about the fact that God's army at Armageddon will fight themselves. Zechariah describes that. Zechariah 14. When the plague that Jesus releases from his mouth, the sword from his mouth, that word of judgment strikes them, their flesh begins to decompose, particularly their eyes and their tongues, so they can't speak, or can't speak intelligibly, and they can't see. So in their terror and panic, they just begin to kill each other. They'll just shoot each other with guns and kill each other. That's what he's talking about here. Every man's sword will be against his brother. Again, using ancient language to describe a modern scenario, a modern military scenario. And I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. I will rain down on him and on his troops and on the many peoples who are with him. So he's speaking of all the armies who come with Gog's forces. Clearly, it's an international military coalition. Flooding rain, great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. And again, some of these things are literal. The hailstones are literal as well, and the fire. All these judgments are part of the trumpet and bowl judgments. Also, the kings of the east will be in full rebellion to Antichrist, coming because for 3.5 years, the world's been getting worse and worse because the judgments of the two witnesses have brought the world to a standstill. And so the Chinese government and the North Koreans said, well, now's our time. We're going to go take control of things so we can rule the world. They think it'll be better unto them. So they're coming against Gog. I will raise a sword against him. I will raise a sword against him. Again, it's a very simple principle. What you sow, you reap. What has God done? For 3.5 years, he's aggressed nations all over the world, and his crowning work was to attack Israel. Now, military forces are coming against him, and he's going to feel the pressure, believe me. So Daniel sees in Daniel 11, 44 and 45, he foresees bad news from the east, troubling the willful king. The willful king is Antichrist, the beast. So he's troubled by this news that these vast armies are coming against him. You know, today, at this time, the Chinese military is growing by leaps and bounds. They're making ships far faster than we are. Their military is growing every day in every aspect. So we understand how close we are to these events. Okay, this point C. The story of this great conflict is retold with additional facts. Now we're looking at Ezekiel 39, 1 through 8. One thing you need to know is that there are a certain context in the Bible where God will tell a story, and he will tell it first succinctly, then tell it again with the details fleshed out. Revelation 12 does this, the conflict between the dragon and the woman. There's an initial description, and then it's expanded for the rest of the chapter. So here, God is going to expand. He's going to retell the story that we've just told, and he's going to add some facts to it. Number one, Gog's armies will fall on the battlefield, and their bodies will be devoured by the birds and the wild animals. Listen to verses 4 and 5. This is Ezekiel 39. You shall fall upon the mountains of Israel, you and all your troops and the peoples who are with you. Now, wait a minute. How can this be? Because we just read that God's going to overwhelm Israel. Well, here's how it can be. Because we're speaking of a period of two battles. One at the midpoint and one at the end. Again, the Armageddon war, or unresolved violent conflict of wills, lasts 3.5 years. So Ezekiel, remember now, we talked about prophetic literature. The prophets didn't understand everything they saw. They just repeated what God showed them. They saw vignettes, little scenes, little clips. We would say brief videos of future events. They described it, and that was that. They didn't understand how they went together. And so in this case, He is seeing the entire war, Ezekiel is, the entire war of Gog versus God and Israel, God's people, that takes place for 3.5 years in the latter half of the tribulation period. Now, Gog is receiving what he has given. Then he goes on to say, I will give you to the birds of prey and every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. You shall fall upon the open field, for I have spoken, says the Lord God. Now, this sacrifice that he's speaking of here, when he says, I'm going to give you to the birds, I'm going to use you like a sacrifice. I'm going to give a sacrifice to the birds. This sacrifice is the opposite of the usual. Instead of sacrificing birds and animals for human worshipers to eat in a sacred dinner, God is sacrificing Antichrist, Gog, and his worshipers for the birds and the animals to devour. Revelation 19, verses 17 through 19 and 21 confirms this sacrificial supper of God. The exact same thing is said. I'm going to go there and read that to you. Bear with me just a moment. Revelation 19, 17. Do that right here. Now here, this is just after the Battle of Armageddon, just as it is closing. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. This is what Revelation calls this event, the supper of the great God. In Revelation, there's the marriage supper of the Lamb. And after that, this is the supper of the great God on earth, that you may eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men. And the flesh of horses and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. So here, John is saying exactly what Ezekiel has seen. This is amazing, just amazing how these scriptures that were written thousands of years apart, or rather in this case, hundreds of years apart, say the same thing. Point 2, God will send fiery destruction on God's capital, Magog. Verse 6. 39, verse 6. And I will send fire on Magog and on those who live securely in the coastlands. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. Send fire. What does he mean? Well, Revelation 18, verses 8 through 10 tell us. Listen to this. It confirms and describes thermonuclear destruction of Great Babylon, probably by Chinese or North Korean intercontinental ballistic missiles. And this will occur just before the final Battle of Armageddon. Remember, they're going to come and challenge him, so it makes sense that they would attack his capital with their weaponry. And do bear in mind that just 30 years ago, North Korea was not a nuclear power. It did not have the delivery systems to, they didn't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They do now, that are enough to reach America or to reach Europe. China has the same, much more of it. But back in the 1940s and 50s, this was not the case, and it wasn't even probable that this would happen. It would be, I would say, laughable. China was so backwards, and North Korea too. North Korea had a terrible war in the early 1950s. And so neither of these nations had anything near to nuclear capacity, much less thermonuclear. And the difference now is that nuclear capacity is an atomic bomb. Thermonuclear devices are hydrogen bombs, far more devastating. So God says, I'm going to rain fire on Magog. Rabbinic sources state that Magog, when written backwards and encrypted, may stand for Babel or Babylon. This is the annotation of Dr. John Walton in the NIV Cultural Background Bible, which, by the way, is an excellent source. Now, and this would link it with Revelation 18, 9, and 10. So Gog is going to reap what he has sown. And let me read Revelation 18, 9, and 10 for you rather than just reference it. Let me read that for you just a moment. Now this says, verse 9, the kings of the east who have committed fornication, the kings of the east, kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, and this is speaking of their relationship with the harlot, shall bewail her and lament for her, when that is great Babylon, when they see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off, for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is your judgment come. Now, if you read the entire chapter, you will see that they're clearly describing thermonuclear destruction. In 1 hour, this vast city, which was the commercial center of the world, all nations traded with this city. It will be Antichrist, the beasts, Gog's political capital, but suddenly it's consumed. What does God say? I'm going to send fire. I'm going to send fire on Magog. Why would he do that? Well, because Gog, at the midpoint of the tribulation, sends fire, figuratively speaking, on Jerusalem, which is the spiritual capital of Jerusalem, of Israel. Though it's not the political capital. So, again, the beast is reaping what he's sown. Gog is reaping what he's sown. This is not coincidental. These principles of the Bible are being fulfilled with I think, a high degree of specificity. What you sow is exactly what you reap. Gog has aggressed the world, so the kings of the east are coming against him militarily. Gog has attacked the capital of God's people and God's nation. So God uses the eastern nations to send fire on his capital, which of course leaves him without a political home base. He reaps what he has sown. Point D, Armageddon's aftermath and God's purpose is Ezekiel 39, 9 through 20. The Israelis will use the military equipment and supplies from Gog's slaughtered coalition as fuel for several years. That's in this text, verses 9 and 10. You can read that. The Israelis will spoil those who spoiled them. Look at verse 10b. And they will plunder those who plundered them, and pillage those who pillaged them. This is the same thing again. At the midpoint, when Antichrist's forces attack Israel, what are they going to do? They're going to pillage the people. They're going to rape and plunder, which has been the case throughout history when there's a military conquest, except by truly Christian nations. They wouldn't allow that, though some of their militants might do it anyway. But in this case, God says that Gog's army is going to be plundered by the Jewish people. Why? Because Israel was spoiled by Gog's forces 3.5 years earlier. Galatians 6 in action again. You will reap what you sow. Number 3, God will summon the birds and animals to devour the carnage of Gog's slain army. Now, we just read the reference from both of these references, the one here from Ezekiel and also the one from Revelation. Let's read this again from Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 17 to 20. As for you, son of man, thus says the Lord God, speak to every sort of bird and every beast of the field. Assemble yourselves and come. Gather yourselves from all sides to my sacrificial meal, which I am sacrificing for you. Excuse me, we did not read this text. We read another that also related to this incident. Now here's what he's saying. A great sacrificial meal on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink blood. Listen to God speaking to the birds and the animals. You shall eat the flesh of the mighty, drink the blood of the princes of the earth, of rams and lambs, of goats and bulls, all of them fatlings of Bashan, which speaks of the best sacrifices. You shall eat fat till you are full, and drink blood till you are drunk at my sacrificial meal, which I am sacrificing for you. You shall be filled at my table with horses and riders, with mighty men, and with all the men of war, says the Lord God. So this expands verse 5 greatly. And I want to add this too. Since this principle of reaping what you sow is in play, here God is saying he's going to take the slain bodies of Gog's military forces and of those of the nations who come with him, and put them on a table, as it were, for the birds and animals to feast and have a sacrificial meal. I think this may imply, and again, I have no grounds to say it dogmatically, but I'm just going to throw this out there. It is possible that the beast, Gog, Antichrist, after he assaults Israel, plunders the people, and he has orders to hunt them down and kill them, slay them, particularly by beheading them. It is possible that he may have some form of human sacrificial, some type of religious ritual where human sacrifice is offered. That's very possible because, again, God is taking his men and making a sacrificial meal out of them to the birds. Now, I'm not speaking of cannibalism, but I am talking about human sacrifice. And if you examine human history, human sacrifice has gone down the ages. It has never ceased. And I'm going to tell you this too, as I told you in an earlier lesson. America has offered far more children to Satan through abortion than the worshipers of Molech ever dreamed of. We're close to 70 million abortions that have been performed in this country over the last 55 to 60 years. That is a shocking fact. So human sacrifice is going on all the time right now, of a different kind, within a carefully controlled and approved by the pagan public medical setting. All right, number 4, Israelis will bury the bones of Gog's armies in the valley of the travelers east of the Dead Sea for 7 months. That's described in those verses, chapter 39, verses 11 through 16. Point 5, this valley will be renamed Valley of Gog's Army. So where the army falls and the bodies are devoured by the animals, the valley will be renamed as the Valley of Gog's Army. In the text, it's Valley of Haman Gog, or Valley of Gog's Army. So this will be a memorial where for the 1,000 years of the millennium, we will look and see this was the great battlefield where it happened. This cleansing prepares the land for the return of God's glory in Israel's captives. So what is this saying here in verses 14 and 16? They will set apart men regularly employed with the help of a search party to pass through the land and bury those bodies remaining on the ground in order to cleanse it. The principle here is clear that Christ can't come in his glory when there are corpses laying around in Israel. So the battlefield has to be cleaned up. Point 7, God's purpose for the Armageddon day is revealed to display and distinguish his sovereign power and glory before Israel and all the nations. This is Ezekiel 39, verse 7. So I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. Then the nations shall know that I am the Lord. This is exactly what he did with Pharaoh. So he ends Israel's captivity to the Gentiles. This is the end of the times of the Gentiles. He ends it just as it began long ago. Gog is the new Pharaoh who has defied God and now been defeated overwhelmingly. And this story of Gog's fall will be retold to children for the whole millennium. Mothers will be telling their children what Yahweh did to the beast, Gog, So this is a fitting in for our lesson here today. Again, we're not able to get to Joel's prophecy. That is an amazing prophecy in Joel 2 and 3. I urge you again, take your syllabus and use it as a study guide. Study every point. Read every reference. Not just to the primary text, but the other references. Read the sections of this book, your textbook, the Day of the Lord commentary, that speak to that. And it will create a very full understanding because we're linking New Testament text, hundreds of them, to these Old Testament revelations.